the most dangerous revenge an INFJ ever delivers is the one nobody recognizes while it's happening. There is no anger, no outburst, no confrontation. Instead, their retaliation unfolds in silence, a psychological shift so subtle, so elegant, that the other person rarely understands what changed or when the power dynamic flipped. INFJs never seek to hurt someone. Their quiet revenge is about reclaiming their peace, exposing truth without speaking it, and letting a person feel the full weight of their own actions reflected back at them. What people misunderstand is this: INFJs do not strike back. They withdraw, they evolve, and they remove emotional access with a precision that feels almost surgical. Their silence becomes the mirror that forces others to face themselves. Their distance becomes the consequence, and their absence becomes the lesson. By the time someone realizes an INFJ has shifted, the INFJ has already outgrown the version of themselves that tolerated the disrespect. They don't play games. They end them internally and permanently. And that is why their revenge is so unnoticed. Because it is not loud. It is transformation. It is elevation. It is the INFJ choosing their own emotional freedom over the cycle that drained them. If you want more deep psychological insights like this, make sure you subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind and drop the word silent in the comments if you're ready for the first warning sign. They emotionally detach without announcing it. The connection dies quietly, not suddenly. The INFJ's silent revenge begins long before anyone realizes a shift has occurred. They don't slam doors, raise their voice, or deliver dramatic exits. Instead, they slip into an internal distance so subtle that the relationship appears normal on the surface, while the emotional foundation has already collapsed beneath it. Where there was once warmth, there is now neutrality. Where there was emotional availability, there is now controlled distance. They stop offering the intuitive support that once held the connection together and begin reclaiming their emotional energy piece by piece. This detachment is not impulsive, it is calculated, rooted in clarity rather than anger. Their intuition has recognized the truth of the dynamic, and their heart begins withdrawing in silence. The connection doesn't break with noise. It dissolves quietly, like a candle burning itself out in a room no one is watching. And the INFJ lets it die without announcing the moment the flame went out. As his emotional detachment deepens, the INFJ's interactions take on a quality that feels strangely hollow. They respond, but without depth. They listen, but without leaning in. They show up, but their presence feels lighter, thinner, almost transparent. What the other person doesn't see is that the INFJ has already accepted the ending, not in words, but in their spirit. They no longer fight for the bond, no longer correct misunderstandings, no longer seek closeness. The INFJ stops being emotionally anchored, and once they unroot themselves internally, the relationship becomes something they can walk away from without looking back. This quiet exit is their revenge, not to hurt the other person, but to free themselves completely. And by the time anyone senses the shift, the INFJ has already disappeared emotionally. The body simply hasn't followed yet. They stop giving you access to their inner world, turning your influence to zero. The moment an INFJ begins their silent revenge, the first door they lock is the one leading into their inner world. The emotional transparency that once made you feel trusted, chosen, and significant disappears without warning. They no longer share their thoughts, fears, insights, dreams, or intuitive readings of the world. Their inner landscape, once open like a softly lit room where you were invited to sit and understand them, becomes sealed behind walls you didn't see being built. They speak, but only from the surface. They answer, but without revelation. You can sense the shift, but you can't name it, because the INFJ doesn't withdraw loudly, they withdraw with precision. That silence you feel is not emptiness, it is control. By shutting down access to their emotional core, they remove the very leverage anyone once had over them. What once influenced them no longer reaches beneath the surface, because nothing and no one is allowed inside anymore. And this withdrawal is not temporary, it is strategic. INFJs know that the deepest power someone holds over them exists in the emotional space they once opened. So when trust breaks, they reclaim that space instantly and completely. The INFJ's inner world becomes a locked vault, and every key you once had dissolves. You can no longer affect their mood, steer their decisions, or shape their emotional reality. Your opinions lose weight, your reactions lose impact, your presence loses meaning. They interact with you politely, even kindly, but from a safe and unreachable distance. This is their quiet revenge, not by harming you, but by removing the access you once mistook for permanence. And once the INFJ closes that inner door, they never reopen it for the same person twice. Their silence becomes the boundary, their distance becomes the consequence. And by the time you realize the depth of what you lost, the INFJ has already rebuilt their inner world without you in it. Their intuition becomes analytical, observing you with calm precision instead of emotion. When an INFJ enters the phase of silent revenge, their intuition shifts from empathetic understanding to analytical observation. The emotional filter through which they once saw you fades, replaced by a sharper, more detached clarity. They begin studying your patterns the way a strategist studies a map. Every motive, every inconsistency, every emotional cue becomes data. They're no longer reacting to your words. They're decoding the psychology behind them. Where they once felt the need to soothe, empathize, or interpret in your favor, now they simply watch. Calmly, quietly, without emotional investment, their intuition becomes a lens that exposes the truth you never intended to reveal. They see the gap between what you say and what you mean. They notice the subtle manipulations, the ego-driven habits, the emotional shortcuts, and they observe all of it with a serenity that feels unnerving because you can no longer influence how they feel, only confirm what they already know. As this analytical intuition strengthens, the INFJ becomes nearly impossible to mislead. They anticipate your reactions before you make them, predict the outcomes of conversations, and detect motives you haven't acknowledged even to yourself. The emotional fog that once blurred their judgment is gone. In its place is a clarity so crisp it feels surgical. They're not looking for ways to understand you anymore. They're identifying the reasons they must distance themselves. Their calm precision becomes their power because nothing you do can move them emotionally. You're no longer speaking to the empathetic version of them, you're speaking to the version who sees you without illusion, and that shift is irreversible. This is the INFJ's silent revenge, replacing emotional vulnerability with intuitive mastery, turning your behavior into an open book while keeping their own pages closed forever. By the time you notice their gaze has changed, the INFJ has already rewritten their understanding of you and made their final decision in silence. They mirror your behavior back at you, letting you experience your own patterns. One of the most subtle and devastating elements of the INFJ's silent revenge is their ability to reflect your behavior back to you with flawless precision. They stop responding the way you're used to, and instead, they adopt the emotional tone, communication style, and level of effort you've been giving them all along. If you've been distant, they become unreachable. If you've been inconsistent, they become impossible to pin down. If you've dismissed their feelings, they give you the same cool indifference. It's not spite, it's revelation. By mirroring your patterns, the INFJ removes the protective cushion their empathy once provided and lets you finally feel the weight of your own actions. They don't explain the shift. They don't warn you. They simply adjust, they understand. They simply adjust their behavior to match the emotional environment you created. And suddenly, what once seemed tolerable when directed at them becomes unbearable when directed back at you. This mirroring is not an attempt to manipulate. It's an INFJ stepping into clarity. Their goal isn't to hurt you, it's to understand you without distortion. By embodying your patterns, they confirm what their intuition has been whispering for months. And without their warmth softening the impact, your behavior becomes unmistakably visible. You feel ignored because you ignored them. You feel unheard because you didn't listen. You feel the absence of care because you never offered it consistently. This is the INFJ's quiet way of restoring balance, not out of vengeance, but out of truth. And by the time you realize you're looking at a mirror instead of the person you once knew, the INFJ has already completed their lesson, letting you face the emotional reality you once forced them to endure. Only now there is no empathy left to protect you from the clarity. They stop protecting your feelings and start protecting their energy. When an INFJ reaches the stage of silent revenge, the most noticeable shift is the collapse of the emotional buffer they once created around you. For months, sometimes years, they've softened their words, carried your emotional weight, and shielded you from the harsher truths of your own behavior. They moderated their tone to avoid hurting you, explained themselves gently to keep peace, and offered emotional cushioning even when you didn't deserve it. But once their trust fractures, that protective instinct shuts down instantly. They stop choosing their words to spare your feelings. They stop bending themselves to preserve your comfort. They stop absorbing emotional blows quietly just to maintain harmony. Instead, they begin redirecting all the energy they once spent on you back into themselves. Their responses become clearer, sharper, and far less filtered, not cruel but honest in a way that no longer prioritizes how you'll react. This is the INFJ stepping into self preservation, choosing their well being over your emotional ease. As this shift deepens, you'll notice that the INFJ no longer internalizes your moods or adjusts their behavior to stabilize the atmosphere. They stop over explaining. They stop smoothing over conflict. They stop rescuing conversations that were already collapsing. The emotional labor they once carried so gracefully is simply gone. And what fills the silence isn't spite, it's clarity. The INFJ begins to protect their own peace with the same intensity they once used to protect your feelings. They conserve their energy, rebuild their emotional boundaries, and let the natural consequences of your actions take their rightful shape. They won't attack you. They don't need to. They simply understand higher dynamic spine. They simply understand the TAF. But one, if the INFJ no longer cushions your emotions, you finally feel the weight of how much they carried all along. Their silence becomes the boundary, their honesty becomes the mirror, and their absence of protection becomes the exact measure of their quiet, calculated revenge. They withdraw their empathy, forcing you to feel the emotional weight you once placed on them. When an INFJ reaches the quiet peak of their silent revenge, the most powerful shift isn't in what they say, it's in what they stop feeling for you. Their empathy, once soft enough to hold your insecurities, your moods, your frustrations, and your inconsistencies, begins to recede like a tide that has finally grown exhausted from reaching too far. The emotional warmth you once relied on disappears, replaced by a stillness that feels foreign and unsettling. They no longer soften their gaze when you're struggling. They don't won you, entire dynamic changes in a way you won you. They don't threaten the emotional you, the emotional tension you bring into the room. Instead, they let the atmosphere remain exactly as you create it. If you are cold, the air stays cold. If you are distant, the silence deepens. If you are chaotic, the chaos echoes back at you. Without their empathy cushioning your impact, you begin to feel the unfiltered weight of your own emotional patterns, the very weight the INFJ carried quietly for far too long. As this withdrawal becomes complete, you realize how profoundly their empathy once shaped the relationship. The INFJ stops interpreting your intentions generously, stops excusing your behavior, and stops offering emotional insight that made you feel understood even when you were difficult to understand. Their emotional absence isn't cruelty, it's a correction. It forces you to stand in the emotional space you created without the buffer of their compassion. For the first time, you feel the rawness of your own words, the sharpness of your actions, the emptiness of your inconsistencies. And the INFJ watches with calm neutrality, not to punish you, but to reclaim themselves. They are no longer the emotional container for your storms. They have stepped out, leaving you to experience the full intensity of what they once absorbed silently. This is the heart of their quiet revenge, not destruction, but revelation. They withdraw empathy not to hurt you, but to heal themselves, and in doing so, they make visible what their compassion once kept hidden. They rewrite their story without you, restoring their identity piece by piece. When an INFJ reaches the stage of silent revenge, their focus shifts inward with a clarity that feels like rebirth. They begin rewriting their story, not by erasing you, but by removing the influence you once held over their sense of self. For so long, they may have shaped parts of their identity around the connection, adjusting their emotional expression, compromising their needs, carrying responsibilities that were never theirs. But once the INFJ sees the truth, their inner narrative starts to transform. They reclaim the parts of themselves they muted to maintain harmony. They rediscover interests, desires, and dreams they placed on hold. They create new routines, new mental spaces, and new emotional landscapes where your presence no longer echoes. And the quiet power of this shift is undeniable. The INFJ is no longer trying to fit into a story that doesn't honor them. They're writing one where they belong, one where their intuition is trusted, their boundaries are respected, and their spirit is free. As this rewriting deepens, the INFJ's identity begins to strengthen in ways you may never have seen before. their confidence grows sharper, their vision becomes clearer, and the emotional fog that once surrounded them lifts entirely. They stop seeking validation from you or anyone else who couldn't meet them where they stood. They stop replaying the past or questioning their worth. Instead, they focus on the future, a future that no longer includes the emotional drain, confusion, or instability tied to the relationship. In this new story, the INFJ becomes whole again, piece by piece, layer by layer. They rebuild themselves with intention, choosing peace over attachment, clarity over chaos, and self respect over emotional compromise. And by the time they finish rewriting that story, the INFJ you once knew is gone, not broken, not bitter, but reborn into the version of themselves that no longer needs you to feel complete. Their absence becomes the consequence, and their silence becomes the closure. When an INFJ completes their silent revenge, they don't deliver grand exits, emotional speeches, or final confrontations. They simply undermove themselves, quietly, completely, and with a calm that feels heavier than any goodbye. Their absence becomes the consequence, not because they want to hurt you, but because staying would continue hurting them. They slip out of the emotional space long before they physically walk away, and by the time you look for them, the connection is already a ghost of what it once was. You reach for their warmth, but there is only distance. You try to provoke a reaction, but there is only silence. And that silence becomes the most powerful form of closure you will ever receive from an INFJ. It is not anger, it is not punishment, it is the final truth. They no longer owe you access to their heart, their mind, or their presence. As this silence settles, something else becomes unmistakably clear. You will not get explanations, you will not get emotional processing, and you will not get the conversation you thought would give you closure. The INFJ has already closed the chapter internally, and closure for them is not an exchange, it is an exit. Their silence is the full stop at the end of the story, the definitive ending that offers no rewrites and no reopening. And in that silence, you're left to confront everything their empathy once softened: the weight of your behavior, the truth of the dynamic, and the loss of someone who loved with depth and left with dignity. Their absence isn't meant to punish, it is meant to free them. But in the process, it becomes the lesson no words could have delivered. The INFJ doesn't say the final word. They are the final word, spoken through the silence you never thought would come. The silent revenge of an INFJ isn't destructive, it's transformative. They don't shatter the connection or seek to wound the other person. Instead, they reclaim their peace in the quietest, most powerful way possible. By withdrawing their empathy, their presence, and their emotional availability, they allow the truth to surface naturally. What remains is a lesson, a space, a mirror, one that forces others to confront themselves without the INFJ's cushioning presence. Their silence becomes the closing chapter, and their disappearance becomes the final boundary. If you want more deep psychological breakdowns about INFJs, intuition, and the hidden dynamics of relationships, make sure you subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind so you never miss a new episode. Before you go, drop the word silent power in the comments if you've ever walked away without saying a single word and felt stronger because of it.